It leads to anxiety, burnout, depression, and suicide. What do we do about that? Well, let's go back to that second circle of faith, of letting what's out there define what's in here. You got a piece of paper on your way in. If you didn't, you can use another piece of paper that you have, or you can use your phone and kind of jot these things down. But I want you to take this piece of paper, and on one side of it, I want you to write down all the things that describe who you are. Okay? We got some guys walking around passing out pieces of paper if you need them. You are not going to turn this in. We're not going to go around and make you stand up and read these or anything like that. This is just between you and God, okay? Write down all the things that identify who you are. I've got some examples here for you that might help you. Husband, wife, dad, mom, grandparent, son, daughter, sibling. Maybe you identify yourself as a student or a teacher, a realtor, a first responder, maybe a Christian, maybe spiritually seeking. Maybe you're defining yourself by your gender or your sexuality. Maybe it's based upon kind of your heritage. American, African-American, African, Nigerian, Mexican, Latino, Latina. Maybe you want to identify yourself as a Republican, Democrat, Independent, Green Party. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not in California anymore. Whatever it is, you go ahead and you put that down there. Maybe it's, you know what, Texan, Cowboy fan, grieving Cowboy fan, whatever it is you want to say there, right? And you just write all the different identities that you have down on that one piece of paper, because this is primarily who you see yourself as. This is primarily the way you define yourself. If I asked, who are you, you would say one of these. Maybe it's your occupation, blue collar, white collar, educator, police officer, whatever it is, write it down there. Now, here's why we do all this. Because primarily for you and for me, the way we identify ourselves and our worth is based upon what's on that piece of paper. But what happens if one of those changes? After the last Olympics, they did this documentary called The Weight of Gold, where they interviewed a lot of the Olympic athletes, some like Michael Phelps and Simone Biles, and other people that maybe you didn't really recognize or weren't household names. And what they discovered was these kids that had grown up in this kind of society that kept telling them, you're going to win a gold, you're going to be an Olympic athlete, went through all the years and years and years and years of practice, and they finally got that gold medal, and then they thought, now what do I do? Or they didn't get the gold and they thought, I'm a loser. And that crushing weight of not living up to what they thought they were supposed to be, or no longer having a goal to chase, led some of them to even go so far as to end their lives. Now, you and I probably can't relate to finding a gold medal, but here's what we can relate to. A parent, and now our kids move out. Who are we? You define yourself by your job, and then your job goes away, or you retire. Who are you? Maybe it's your career. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe you were a high school legend. Then you go to college. Who are you now? All of us go through some kind of identity crisis, and the lies that we tell ourselves kind of steep in and begin to tell us something about ourselves that isn't really true. So here's what I want to do. All of us have an identity crisis, okay? All of us are trying to figure out who we are. All of us have voices in our head trying to weigh in on this, and all of us are lying to ourselves. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start way out and seemingly left field. We're going to talk about some philosophy and how we got to where we are today and a little bit of anthropology, and then we're going to bring it back to the Bible and see what it has to say. So here we go, and some of you are going to feel like you're back in class, back in school. Hang with me here, but it's going to be helpful for us. We have been on a journey ever since the beginning of time when it comes to how do we define ourselves. There's this author by the name of Carl Trueman that writes these incredible books, and he wrote this book called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. And he realized it was too big, too thick, too long, nobody read it, so he wrote a shorter one called A Strange New World. And in this book, he talks about just the journey that we've been through as a culture. And it starts way, 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 way back, like before Jesus, okay? We're talking like the honor culture time. And here's the way our society viewed itself. Our society was based on what kind of honor can I achieve by bringing good to the community. Men would do this by going to war, going out to hunt. Women would do this by bringing children into the world. That was how they received honor, by giving back to their community. And so if a woman back then were to say, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to get a nanny. and I'm going to go start a bakery down in the city square, they'd look at her like, what are you doing? That's insane. Now, today, we wouldn't think anything of it. But back then, the way culture was, they wouldn't see it that way at all. You read about this in the Bible. Like Hannah crying out before God, I need a baby, I need a baby, I need a baby. It was all about what she felt like she needed, bring to the community. Many of us have been in that situation, crying out for family, but that was based on their culture back then. Then it shifted to more of a philosophical culture. This culture was more about how we think. I think, therefore I am. And so it was statements like, what kind of prudence and temperance do we have? And how do we behave? And how do we, engage in idea culture and thought culture and those kind of things? That's the honor we bring to our society by how we think. And now we give back. And then it moved around the 1700s to the Renaissance to the beauty culture. This was all about how we can create for the sake of beauty. Now, I was just thinking about this a few days ago when I was in Paris, and I'm looking around at all the architecture. Everything there is built to inspire beauty. I mean, even the graffiti they leave up because they consider it art. I said, it's not very good art, but if you're going to leave it up, maybe we ought to just do something with it. But anyway, they love it over there. And everything they do over there is about this beauty idea. And there was a period of time where everything that was created was to add beauty to what you see and do and think and all those kind of things. It's a way we give back to the culture. Now, this basically is summed up in two different circles of the way that we viewed life. One is circle number one, and that is fables, where you had this Greek mythology or the gods out there, or we're not really sure, but we got this legend. And then you moved into faith, which is a different circle, where there's a monotheism, there's one God, we believe in him, but here's the distinctive about both of them. They're all from the outside coming in. There is something bigger than us that has made us and defined us. And maybe we live by honor, maybe we live by philosophy, maybe we live by beauty, but it's all outside in. Everything changed after that. Somewhere over the course of the last 100 years, things begin to shift from not an honor culture or a philosophical culture or a beauty culture, but to an authenticity culture, which was all based on feelings. Not fable, not faith, but feelings. In other words, instead of there's a God out there defining who I am in here, now there's me defining who God is. You catch that? Now it's me defining the rules of the world. And then became this new culture that we refer to as the authenticity culture. It is all about how I feel that defines reality. Now, a lot of this came from three different guys: Nietzsche, Karl Marx, and Sigmund Freud. Freud was the biggest proponent of this because he basically said, you're a collection of desires, just go for it. Who cares? Just live your best self. Be you. And out of that came a variety of phrases that you and I are just used to today. It's the water we swim in. Words like this: the heart wants what the heart wants. Here's another one: follow your heart. You do you. Speak your truth. There's another good one. And then how about this one? Be true to yourself. You know who said be true to yourself? It comes from a Shakespeare play. And the character who said it was the fool. Now, it's one of our cultural values. You be true to yourself. You know who first said the heart wants what the heart wants? Woody Allen. And he's the guy that married his 15-year-old stepdaughter. You see, this idea of feelings culture, I define reality, I define God, have not got us to where we want to go. In fact, happiness and identity have become about feeling good, not being good. So where honor culture and philosophical culture and beauty culture were about inside out as far as serving and doing good, defining from the outside in, this new culture goes just the opposite. And you and I are just living in it. It's just what we see every single day, and we're definitely influenced by it. Take a look at what John Mark Comer, who's a pastor and author, he says this: self is the new God, the new spiritual authority, the new morality. But this puts a crushing weight on the self, one it is never designed to bear. It must discover itself, become itself, stay true to itself, justify itself, make itself happy, perform and defend its fragile identity. As my Peloton instructor would say, validate your greatness. But what about the many days when we're not all that great? The pressure is exhausting. Cue the stats on burnout, anxiety, and mental health. And let's be honest, isn't this exhausting? Look at the things that are on your sheet of paper. Some of those things might rub others the wrong way. Isn't it exhausting always standing up for your identity? I mean, if you identify yourself by your sexual preferences, isn't it exhausting making sure nobody looks down on you for that? If you identify yourself by your politics, isn't it exhausting trying to get others to believe what you believe? If you identify yourself by your skin color, isn't it exhausting making sure no one is racist towards you or no one thinks that you are racist? If you define yourself by maybe your religious denomination, isn't it exhausting making sure that others know they're wrong and you're right? I had a chance a few years ago to interview this Christian psychologist. He's an author. He's been in Newsweek. His name is Dr. Matthew Sleeth. It was on episode 178 on our podcast around here, and I asked him about this whole trend that we're dealing with, and he said this: over the last 25 years, medicine, science, psychology, and culture have done everything recommended to stop the suicide trend, and it's only gotten worse. Think about that. Over the last 25 years, medicine, science, and education has done everything recommended to try to slow down the suicide rate, and it's only gotten worse. And I said, what was recommended? And he said, don't just accept, affirm. Look at every life choice by everybody else and applaud their decision. But it hasn't worked. They found that 51% more young people feel overwhelmed in 2016 than they did in 2009, and the numbers for feeling depressed has risen by 95%, and the suicide rate continues to go up. In other words, the stories we tell ourselves about our identity, they aren't working. And here's why. Because you and I make terrible gods. We all want the gig, we just can't do it. We'd love to be in charge, but we don't make good decisions. And when you and I decide, I'll do me, the heart wants what the heart wants, I'm going to go with what I feel, and I'll define God on my terms, friends, it leads to anxiety, burnout, depression, and suicide. So, with all that good news, aren't you glad you came to church today? What do we do about that? Well, let's go back to that second circle of faith, of letting what's out there define what's in here. Let's go back to asking, what does God say about us?